Good morning, everybody. I hope everyone's doing well. If you're new to my channel, hi, my name is Josie, and I created this channel specifically to help families discover more about Portugal and the Silver Coast area. So I had loads of you guys reach out asking, one, why we moved to Portugal, and two, why we chose Caldas, which is about an hour north of Lisbon. So y'all know I can talk a lot. So I'm gonna create a two-part series. So the first video will be about why we moved to Portugal, and the second part will be why we chose Caldas. So why did we choose Portugal? Well, when I was 11, I was enrolled in private school for 2 years. And in that private school, they introduced us to the French language. So we learned French for an hour every day, through the week. And that was my first encounter with a different European language. And I was always just so enamored by it. I just loved it. I don't know why. I don't know what it was. Maybe it was the sound of it, but I just loved it. And when I was 21, my aunt took me on this amazing 10 or 11 day trip. We visited 5 different countries in Europe, and we got to explore the culture, which I loved. So I always had this dream of living in Europe. I remember when I was, 22 or something, I was talking to one of my friends, and I'm like, let's just move to Europe. Let's just be an au pair or something. I don't know. But we never did it. So it just never happened. So when I met my husband, who I'm not sure if you guys are aware, he's French. So when we got married, it was amazing because I was like, wow, okay, let's just move to Europe. And he had just moved to the States because of me. So that's a whole nother video. I'll just make another video about how we met and everything. But when he first came, we were getting his paperwork situated and all that stuff because we got married and had to do all that stuff. And I remember telling him, let's just move to Europe. And, as most foreigners who come to America, I think it's maybe the shows or something, but they were just like, no, I love America. Let's just stay in America. And with myself, I'm like, okay, I guess that makes sense because my job's in the States. He works in IT, so it would be easier for him to get a job in IT in the States as well. So we decided to stay in the States. And throughout our marriage, I always brought it up, hey, let's move to Europe, And he would then tell me, look, I know you like Europe and all, especially France, but there are a lot of things about America that you may miss, you won't get in Europe, like the customer service or the convenience of being able to wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning and go to the grocery store if you really wanted to, or even the earning potential for jobs. So there are a lot of things that kept us in the States. And we would try to visit his family every other year, every 2 to 3 years. Like I said, every couple of years, I'm always like, oh, so when do you think you want to move to France? He'd always be like, not today, I'm not talking about this or whatever. So it was right before COVID happened. His dad actually had a cancer scare. And I think that was when he kind of realized that he was missing out on a lot of his family. Again, we saw his family every 2 to 3 years, and of course they would Skype every weekend or whatnot. But as we had kids and gotten older, I think we started to realize now we had to figure out where we saw ourselves in the next 10, 20, 30 years. So after his dad had his cancer scare, my husband and I, we just really realized that now is the time to move so that he can be closer to his family, and also so I can experience the culture, of course. And I think a lot of it had to deal with our kids. We wanted our kids to be immersed in a different culture. And not to say that America's not diversified in different cultures, because obviously I think America is a melting pot of so many different ethnicities, but we wanted to get them away from at least the area that we were living in. It felt like such a bubble. And a bubble being, there was a lot of entitlement that we saw, a lot of kids are always on some sort of electronic. I feel like we shelter our kids a lot. Ugh, I feel horrible for saying all this. I wanted our kids to have access to a slower paced lifestyle. And even in France, you can find that. And I think most European countries, you know, you see the kids play outside more. You see the kids kind of just be kids. I don't know, it's hard to explain, but we wanted them to get out of that bubble of America, really. Plus, we had to take into account like our future, right? Like the cost of living in our area was extremely high, or is extremely high. You know, we were factoring college cost, and I think after we crunched some numbers down when we had our first kid, we expected to have to save about, I want to say it was like $250,000 for college for each kid. And we just thought, wow, that's crazy. If you go to Europe, I think you're paying like $1,000 or $5,000 or something very nominal that is completely different than back in the States. So we just wanted to be wise about our money and our future too. You're probably thinking, wait, Josie, you're in Portugal, you're not in France, which is true. And this is why. Okay, so my husband and I sat down and we're like, you know, we're planning everything out for France. Okay, we're gonna be living in the south of France and we're gonna do X, Y, and Z, and you know, we were planning for all this. Literally up until like, I wanna say a month before we were supposed to fly out to Portugal. But let's rewind and talk about this. So when we compared both countries, and I'm telling you, we were comparing both countries for like a year solid. Initially it was, we're moving to Portugal, and then the next month's like, no, we're moving to France, and so forth. It's crazy. But when we compared both countries, we pretty much wrote everything down, like, okay, well, France, obviously my husband's French, so he knows the language, and he would feel comfortable kind of figuring out the bureaucracies or the paper, all that stuff. He would be comfortable with it because it's not like a new language for him. Second, we have family there, so the transition will be easier. It's just a lot of benefits of moving to France when you're a French person, obviously. But how did we move to Portugal? Well, after talking to a few different tax accountants and factoring in cost of living in France, we realized that if we moved to France, we wouldn't be saving money by moving to France, which obviously when you're moving to Europe and thinking about cost-related stuff, you want wherever you move to be at least how much you're paying now, if not a lot less. So we then looked into Portugal again, and we realized that Portugal just made more sense on paper because like the flight to the US is a little bit shorter, but still a reasonable flight to France. I think it's like 2 hours. And the weather is better in Portugal. Cost of living is significantly better. Taxes are obviously better because you have the NHR program that you can save a lot on your taxes. And overall, I believe it's the Portuguese people that really was the reason why I moved to Portugal versus France. I'm sure you probably all know. I feel like the Portuguese people are just so much nicer than the French. And you'll hear that. You'll hear people say, oh, Portuguese are the friendliest people ever, which they are. You don't hear that so much about the French. Not to say that you won't stumble across some really nice French people, but I think in Portugal, people are just generally more welcoming than the French. Don't kill me in the comment section for that. And lastly, of course, the weather is great, but we also loved the fact that in Portugal, there are more languages that are widely spoken here. So obviously you have Portuguese, you have French, you have English, and of course other foreign languages from other foreign natives that live here. So we just love the fact that our kids can still continue to learn the English language, which was a big thing for us. And I forgot to mention, the food, y'all are gonna kill me about this one. I actually much prefer Portuguese food than French food. I know, I'm weird, but I just love the array of seafood that you can get here in Portugal. And I'm not a big like cream and butter person that the French have in their cuisine, so I much prefer Portuguese food. However, the baked items in France are amazing. So I will say the bakery items are delicious in France. All right, so why we chose Caldas. Okay, now I have to put some disclaimers out there. One, this is from my point of view, so I don't want you guys to get upset on how I describe other areas, so be gentle. Okay,